The distant sun blazed orange through the clouds as Nick Jackson's fishing boat bobbed lazily on the alien sea. Nick leaned back in the pilot's chair, his grizzled face creased in a contented smile. After 2 decades serving as a space trooper on the front lines, fighting the vicious Thorlax on a dozen hellish planets, this quiet retirement on Aquaria Prime suited him just fine. He reached over and flipped a switch, deploying the electronets to trawl for razorfish. The tasty critters fetched a good price at the way station Zeta Market, enough to keep him in whiskey and women on his monthly supply runs. Life was good. A flashing light on the console caught his eye. Odd, the net was registering something big, way bigger than razorfish. Probably just some flotsam caught in the filaments. With an annoyed grunt, Nick fired the thrusters and swung the boat around to haul in his catch. As the net rose into view, Nick's jaw dropped. Tangled in the glowing strands was the lithe blue form of a humanoid female alien. Her skin was the pale azure of a winter sky, contrasting with the straight raven hair that floated around her angelic face. A flimsy, silvery shift barely concealed her curves. "Well, slap my ass and call me Sally," Nick muttered in disbelief. In all his years of star hopping, he'd never seen an alien that looked so human, so exquisite. He hit the control to bring the net into the hold, his mind racing. A few minutes later, he knelt beside the mysterious beauty laid out on the deck. She was breathing and appeared unharmed. Nick reached out a tentative hand to brush aside a lock of midnight hair. At his touch, her eyes fluttered open, irises swirling with opalescent colors he couldn't name. She regarded him with a gaze of pure wonderment. "Are you human?" Her voice was a throaty purr that sent a shiver down Nick's spine. He nodded dumbly, transfixed by her ethereal beauty. She smiled, revealing dazzling white teeth. "I am Cilia of the Quen. I have never met a human male before." Her eyes roamed hungrily over Nick's muscular form. "You are more impressive than I imagined." Nick felt himself flush as he helped Cilia to her feet. She moved with a lissom grace, her body brushing his in a way that quickened his pulse. "Welcome aboard," he managed to say. "I'm Nick Jackson. Looks like you had a bit of trouble out there, Miss Cilia." She laughed, a musical sound that filled the hold. "Please, call me Cilia, and it appears fortune has smiled upon my misfortune, delivering me to you." Her hand lingered on his arm, sending electricity through his veins. Nick's mind reeled, desire warring with caution. He knew virtually nothing about this alluring alien who'd literally dropped into his lap, but his body had already made the decision for him. "Let me show you around," he said with a roguish grin. "It's not much, but it's cozy. We'll figure out how to get you home after we get to know each other a bit." Cilia's full lips curved in a knowing smile as she took his proffered arm. "I would like that very much, Nick Jackson. Very much indeed." As he led her to his quarters, Nick marveled at the turn his day had taken. From solitary fisherman to intergalactic ladies' man in the blink of an eye. The guys at the way station would never believe it. Hell, he barely believed it himself. But the warmth of Cilia's sinuous form pressed against him was undeniably real. She was soft and yielding in all the right places, setting his blood on fire. He could scarcely wait to peel that tantalizing shift from her blue skin and explore the wonders beneath. Still, a sliver of his battle-hardened instincts pricked at the back of his mind. This all seemed too good to be true. A beautiful, willing alien female practically falling into his arms? There had to be a catch. But as Cilia pulled him into a searing kiss, her nimble tongue dancing with his, all rational thought fled. His hands roamed the silken expanse of her back, fingers kneading the taut swell of her hips. She made a throaty noise of encouragement, molding her body against the hard planes of his. Nick lost himself in a haze of urgent caresses and fevered kisses as they tumbled onto his bunk, limbs entwined. Cilia's shift slithered to the floor, revealing expanses of cerulean flesh that took his breath away. "I want to know every inch of you," she purred, deft fingers making quick work of his clothing. "Show me the pleasures of human males." Any lingering hesitation melted away as Nick surrendered to the alien siren's sensual spell. His universe narrowed to the press of blue skin against bronzed, the slide of sweat-slicked bodies lost in carnal rapture. Cilia's voice blended with his as they moved together, caught in the intensity of the moment, driven by an unspoken force that neither could resist. In the back of his passion-fogged mind, Nick knew he was in uncharted space, chasing a starburst of pleasure more intense than any he'd known. Cilia moved beneath him in ways that seemed to defy human anatomy, her body playing him with an almost unnatural ardor. Coherent thought fled as the supernova built, his vision going white as he reached an earth-shattering climax. Cilia keened her own rapture, back arching like a drawn bow as she shattered in his arms. They collapsed together in a tangle of heaving flesh, struggling to catch their breath. Nick's head spun, reeling from the magnitude of what had just transpired. That had been transcendent, inhuman. He looked down at the alien beauty sprawled across his chest, a satisfied smirk playing about her lush lips. Cilia traced lazy patterns on his sweat-sheen skin, opalescent eyes aglow. "That was a most educational introduction to the ways of human males," she purred. "I believe I will enjoy furthering my studies immensely." Nick barked a laugh, capturing her wandering hand and bringing it to his lips. "Sweetheart, I'll be your eager tutor anytime." He nibbled at her fingers, delighting in her kittenish mule. "But first you need to tell me how you ended up floating in my net." "Not that I'm complaining, mind you." Cilia's smile faltered, a shadow dimming her luminous eyes. "That is a long and perilous tale, my Nick. One I fear may bring great danger to your door." She nestled closer, as if seeking his protection. "But for now, let us revel in our newfound connection. The outside world can wait a bit longer." As she pulled him down for another incendiary kiss, Nick decided she had the right of it. Explanations could wait. He intended to spend the next hours discovering the heights of pleasure only an alien lover could show him. But even lost in the whirlwind of lust, the battle-scarred trooper in him couldn't help but wonder just what kind of trouble he'd fished out of the sea, and how long this idyll could last before it came knocking. Nick awoke to the unfamiliar sensation of silken skin pressed against his own. He blinked, momentarily disoriented, before the memories of the previous night came rushing back. Cilia, the mysterious alien beauty he'd fished out of the sea, the mind-blowing sex that had followed. He turned his head to find her watching him, those mesmerizing, opalescent eyes sparkling with mischief. "Good morning, my virile human," she purred, trailing a finger down his chest. "I trust you slept well?" Nick grinned, capturing her hand and bringing it to his lips. "Best damn sleep of my life, sweetheart, though I'm not sure how much actual sleeping happened." Cilia laughed, a throaty sound that sent a jolt of desire straight to his groin. "Indeed, you are quite insatiable." She stretched languorously, the sheet slipping down to reveal tantalizing expanses of blue flesh. "A trait I find most appealing." Nick's grin widened as he rolled over, pinning her beneath him. "Glad to hear it, because I'm not done with you yet." He captured her mouth in a searing kiss, reveling in the taste of her, the feel of her lithe body arching against his. Cilia responded with equal fervor, her nimble tongue dancing with his as her hands roamed his back. They lost themselves in each other, the universe narrowing to the press of flesh against flesh, the mingled sounds of their passion filling the cabin. Nick marveled at Cilia's responsiveness, the way she seemed to anticipate his every move, her body molding to his as if they were made for each other. It was only when they were both spent, limbs entwined and chests heaving, that reality began to intrude once more. Nick propped himself up on an elbow, studying Cilia's flushed face. "As much as I'd love to stay in this bunk with you forever, we need to talk," he said gently. "Starting with how you ended up in my fishing net." Cilia sighed, the playful light in her eyes dimming. "I know, and I owe you an explanation." She sat up, pulling the sheet around her like a shield. "But first, I need to know that I can trust you, Nick, that you won't betray my secret to anyone else." Nick frowned, a sliver of unease threading through him. "Betray your secret? To who?" He sat up as well, facing her. "Cilia, I'm just a retired space trooper trying to live a quiet life. I don't have anyone to tell secrets to, even if I wanted to, which I don't." She searched his face for a long moment, as if weighing his sincerity. Finally, she nodded. "I believe you, and I pray to the gods of my world that my trust is not misplaced." Taking a deep breath, she began her tale. "I am a princess of the Queen, a race of shapeshifters from the Zillion Nebula. My people have the ability to assume any form we choose, though our natural state is the blue skin you see now." Nick's eyebrows shot up. Shapeshifters? He'd heard rumors of such beings during his trooper days, but had always dismissed them as spacer tales. Looks like those tales were true, after all. "A few cycles ago, my father, the king, was overthrown and murdered by his power-hungry brother, Zadie. My entire family was slaughtered, and I barely escaped with my life." Cilia's voice trembled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I've been on the run ever since, trying to stay one step ahead of Zadie's assassins. But as far as he knows, I perished along with the rest of my family. And I'd like to keep it that way." Nick's heart clenched at the pain in her voice. No wonder she'd been so cautious, so desperate to know she could trust him. He reached out, taking her hand in his. I'm so sorry, Celia. I can't imagine what you've been through. He squeezed her fingers gently. Your secret is safe with me, I swear it. No one will ever learn the truth from my lips. A single tear tracked down Celia's cheek as she managed a wavering smile. Thank you, Nick. Your words mean more than you can know. She twined her fingers with his. I'm so tired of the pain, the intrigue, the constant betrayal. I just want to live a normal, quiet life far from the ghosts of my past. To start anew in a place where no one knows my name or my sorrows. Nick's heart went out to her. He knew all too well the bone-deep weariness that came from a life of battle and loss. The yearning for peace, for a place to call home. An idea began to form, taking root in his mind and his heart. Maybe it was crazy, impulsive, but it felt right. It felt like destiny. You could stay here, he said slowly, holding her gaze. With me, on Aquaria Prime. He reached up to cup her cheek, brushing away the tear with his thumb. I know we just met, and this might sound crazy, but I feel like the gods brought you to me for a reason. Like we were meant to find each other. Celia's eyes widened, hope and disbelief warring in their opalescent depths. Do you mean it, Nick? You would let me stay? Build a life with you? He nodded, a lopsided grin tugging at his lips. I've never been more sure of anything, sweetheart. I can't just abandon a maiden in distress, especially one who fell into my life like a gift from the sea. What kind of gentleman would I be then? A laugh bubbled up from Celia's throat, bright and joyous. She flung her arms around his neck, peppering his face with kisses. Oh, Nick, yes, 1,000 times yes. There's nothing I want more than to stay here with you, to leave my old life behind and start fresh in your arms. Nick hugged her close, marveling at the way she fit against him, like two pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Then it settled. Welcome home, Celia. Welcome to your new life. As he claimed her lips once more, sealing their future with a kiss, Nick felt a sense of rightness settle over him. For so long, he'd been drifting, searching for a purpose, a reason to keep going beyond mere survival. And now he'd found it in the most unexpected way imaginable. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, he knew. Celia had her secrets, her scars, just as he had his. But together he believed they could heal, could build something beautiful from the ashes of their past. She was his siren, his mermaid, the answer to a prayer he hadn't even known he'd whispered. And he would spend the rest of his days cherishing her, protecting her, loving her with every fiber of his being. Grinning against Celia's lips, Nick surrendered to the promise of their future, to the adventure of a lifetime. His quiet retirement had just gotten a lot more interesting, and he wouldn't have it any other way. The days turned into weeks as Nick and Celia settled into their new life together. Nick found himself marveling at how easily she fit into his world, as if she'd always been meant to be there. She took to life on Aquaria Prime like a fish to water, her natural curiosity and zest for life bringing a spark of joy to even the most mundane tasks. In the mornings, they would fish together, Celia's quick reflexes and keen eye proving invaluable in hauling in the day's catch. She seemed to have an almost preternatural gift for sensing where the razorfish were hiding, an ability she attributed to her Quen heritage. My people are naturally attuned to the rhythms of the water, she explained one day as they lounged on the deck of Nick's boat, basking in the warm sun. It's in our blood, our bones. Even in this form, I can feel the currents, the ebb and flow of life beneath the waves. Nick smiled, running a hand along the silken skin of her thigh. Well, I certainly won't complain about having my own personal good luck charm on board. Celia laughed, the sound carrying on the salt-tinged breeze. I'm not sure if it's luck or skill, but I'm happy to be of service, Captain Jackson. The way she purred his title sent a shiver down Nick's spine, a reaction that had nothing to do with the breeze and everything to do with the heat in her opalescent eyes. In the afternoons, after the day's catch was sorted and stored, they would explore the coves and inlets that dotted the coastline, marveling at the alien flora and fauna that thrived in the shallows. Celia was endlessly fascinated by the strange creatures that called Aquaria Prime home, from the luminescent jellyworms that drifted on the currents to the singing crystalfish that chimed in the underwater caves. Everything here is so different from Quenya, she marveled one afternoon as they picnicked on a secluded beach, the violet sand warm beneath their bare feet. The colors, the sounds, the very air itself. It's like stepping into a dream. Nick twined his fingers with hers, bringing her hand to his lips. A dream I never want to wake from, he murmured, his eyes holding hers. Because it would mean losing you. Celia's breath caught, her free hand coming up to cup his cheek. You'll never lose me, Nick. Not in this life or any other. My heart is yours, now and forever. Their lips met in a kiss that tasted of salt and sun and eternal promise. They made love there on the beach, the crash of the waves and the cries of the shorebirds mingling with their own sounds of passion. Afterwards, they lay tangled together on the sand, their bodies cooling in the gentle breeze. Nick ran his fingers through Celia's silken hair, marveling at the way the fading sunlight played across her azure skin. Tell me about your life on Kenya, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. I want to know everything about you, every memory, every dream. Celia smiled, a wistful curve of her lips. My childhood was a happy one for the most part. As a princess, I wanted for nothing material. The palace was a wonder to behold, all soaring crystal spires and lush hanging gardens. I would spend hours exploring its hidden nooks and crannies, dreaming of the adventures I would have one day. Her expression turned pensive, her fingers tracing the scars that mapped Nick's chest. But even then, I knew my life was not truly my own. As a member of the royal family, my every move was watched, my every word weighed for its potential impact. I was a pawn in the game of politics, a tool to be used for the benefit of the crown. Nick's heart ached for the lonely girl she had been, the weight of duty and expectation heavy on her slender shoulders. I'm sorry, love. No child should have to bear such a burden. Celia shook her head, her smile returning. It wasn't all bad. I had my siblings, my parents. We were a close-knit family, despite the pressures of our station. Some of my fondest memories are of the times we would sneak away from our handlers and just be together, laughing and playing like normal children. Her voice hitched, tears welling in her luminous eyes. I miss them, Nick. I miss them so much it feels like a physical ache in my chest. To know that I'll never see them again, never hear their voices or feel their embrace. Nick gathered her close, his own eyes stinging with sympathy. I know, sweetheart. Believe me, I know. He took a shuddering breath, the old grief rising up to choke him. I lost my own family when I was just a kid. Raiders attacked our colony, slaughtered everyone in sight. I only survived because my mother hid me in a crawl space beneath the floor. Celia gasped, her arms tightening around him. Oh, Nick, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. He shrugged, the motion tight with remembered pain. It was a long time ago, but the hurt never really goes away. It's like a scar on your soul, always there even when you can't see it. They held each other in silence for a long moment, the weight of their shared sorrow a tangible thing between them. But there was comfort too, in the knowledge that they were no longer alone in their grief. What made you join the troopers? Celia asked at last, her fingers still tracing the ridges of his scars. Was it because of what happened to your family? Nick nodded, his jaw tight. Partly. I wanted to make sure no other kid had to go through what I did. But more than that, I needed a purpose, a reason to keep going. The troopers gave me that. They gave me a family again, brothers and sisters in arms to fight beside, to die for if need be. He blew out a breath, the memories of blood and fire and screams flashing behind his eyes. And die they did. So many good men and women cut down in the prime of their lives. And for what? A few scraps of territory? A fleeting taste of glory? Sometimes I wonder if it was all worth it. Celia cupped his face in her hands, her gaze fierce and bright. It was worth it because it made you the man you are today. The man I love with all my heart and soul. Your scars, your pain, they're a part of you, just as mine are a part of me. And I wouldn't change a single thing about you, Nick Jackson. Not one single thing. Nick's breath caught, his heart swelling with a love so fierce it stole his breath. He crushed his mouth to hers, pouring all the emotion he couldn't put into words into the kiss. Celia responded with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his hair, her body arching into his. They made love again there on the beach, the salt of their tears mingling with the salt of the sea. And as they moved together, skin sliding against skin, hearts beating as one, Nick knew that he had finally found his true purpose, his true home. It was her. It had always been her. Celia lifted her head to meet his gaze, her eyes luminous in the starlight filtering through the viewport. My home is here now, with you. You're my something greater, Nick, my reason for being. And I wouldn't trade this life, this love, for anything in the universe. Nick's heart swelled, his throat tightening with emotion. I love you, Celia, he rasped, the words both an oath and a prayer. More than life, more than breath. You're my everything. And I love you, my brave trooper, she whispered, sealing her vow with a kiss. Until the stars burn out and the seas run dry, I am yours. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, their hearts beating in perfect sync. And for the first time and longer than he could remember, Nick's dreams were filled not with the horrors of war, but with visions of a bright and shining future, with Celia at his side. But even as they lost themselves in the bliss of their newfound love, Nick couldn't shake the feeling that it was all too good to be true. That somewhere out there the shadows of the past were gathering, waiting to drag them back into the darkness. He held Celia closer, his jaw clenching with fierce determination. Whatever storms may come, whatever dangers may threaten, he would face them head-on. For her, for their love, he would fight to his last breath. She was his siren, his savior, the light that had pierced the shadows of his soul. And he would be damned if he let anyone or anything take her from him. Come what may, they would face it together, and together they would triumph. Weeks turned into months as Nick and Celia settled into a blissful routine, their love growing stronger with each passing day. They fished, they explored, they made love under the stars and in the warm waters of the coves. It was a simple life, but one filled with joy and passion, a balm to both their war-weary souls. Nick had never known such peace, such contentment. Celia filled a void in his heart he hadn't even known existed, her presence a soothing balm to the scars that mapped his body and mind. With her by his side, he felt whole, complete in a way he'd never dreamed possible. But even as they lost themselves in their newfound happiness, Nick couldn't shake the feeling that it was all too good to last. That somewhere out there, the shadows of the past were gathering, waiting to drag them back into the darkness. His fears proved all too prophetic one fateful morning as they sat enjoying a leisurely breakfast on the deck of his boat. The sun was just cresting the horizon, painting the sea in shades of gold and rose, when a strange vessel appeared in the sky, growing larger by the second. Nick leapt to his feet, his hand going instinctively to the blaster at his hip. "Celia, get below deck," he barked, his eyes never leaving the approaching ship. "Now!" But Celia remained rooted in place, her face draining of color as she stared at the sleek black craft. "It's them," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "Zadi's assassins. They found me." Nick's blood ran cold, his grip tightening on his blaster. "How? How could they have tracked you here?" Celia shook her head, tears welling in her luminous eyes. "I don't know, but it doesn't matter now. They're here, and they won't stop until I'm dead." "Like hell they will," Nick growled, stepping in front of her, shielding her with his body. "They'll have to go through me first." The assassin's ship drew closer, until Nick could make out the sleek lines of its hull, the wicked-looking weapons bristling from its sides. It was a craft designed for speed and stealth, a predator built to hunt and kill. A hatch opened on the ship's underside and a figure dropped from it, landing on the deck of Nick's boat with a heavy thud. It was a Quen male, his blue skin mottled with scars, his eyes cold and dead as a shark's. "Princess Celia," he said, his voice a rasping hiss. "You have been a difficult quarry to track, but your uncle will be pleased to know that his wayward niece has been found at last." Celia lifted her chin, her eyes flashing with defiance. "I am no one's quarry, assassin, and I will never return to Quenya to live as a prisoner in my own home." The assassin's lips curled in a cruel smile. "Who said anything about returning? My orders are to eliminate you, to ensure that the true king's rule is never challenged." Nick stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Celia and the assassin. "You'll have to go through me first, you son of a bitch." The assassin's eyes flicked to Nick, dismissive. "A human? How quaint. I'll enjoy killing you as a warm-up for the main event." With a speed that belied his bulk, the assassin lunged, a wicked-looking blade appearing in his hand as if by magic. Nick barely had time to dodge, the razor-sharp edge slicing through the air where his throat had been a moment before. He brought his blaster up, squeezing off a shot, but the assassin was too fast, twisting out of the way with inhuman grace. The bolt sizzled harmlessly into the sea, sending up a geyser of steam. Nick cursed, adjusting his aim, but the assassin was already moving, closing the distance between them with terrifying speed. The blade flashed again, and this time Nick wasn't quite fast enough. White-hot pain seared across his chest as the knife found its mark, slicing through skin and muscle like butter. Nick staggered back, his free hand pressing against the wound, feeling the hot gush of blood between his fingers. Dimly, he heard Cilia scream his name, her voice raw with terror, but he couldn't focus on her, couldn't afford to take his eyes off the assassin for even a second. The Quenmale grinned, a feral baring of teeth. "First blood to me, human. But don't worry, I'll make your death quick. I have more important prey to hunt," Nick snarled, the pain in his chest fueling his rage, his determination. He would not let this bastard touch Cilia, not while there was still breath in his body. With a roar, he charged, firing his blaster wildly, forcing the assassin to dodge and weave. The Quenmale was fast, inhumanly so, but Nick had a lifetime of combat experience to draw upon, honed in the bloody crucible of war. He feinted left, then spun right, his blaster coming up in a lightning-quick arc. The assassin twisted, trying to evade, but this time he was a fraction too slow. The bolt caught him high in the shoulder, spinning him around, the smell of charred flesh filling the air. The assassin hissed in pain, his free hand clamping over the wound, blue blood seeping between his fingers. "Damn you, human," he spat, his eyes blazing with hatred. "I'll carve your heart out for that." Nick bared his teeth in a feral grin, his own blood dripping down his chest. "Come and try, you blue-skinned bastard." They clashed again, blaster and blade flashing in the morning sun. The deck of the boat slick with blood and sweat. Nick could feel his strength waning, the wound in his chest sapping his energy with every passing second. But he refused to yield, refused to give an inch. For Cilia, for their love, he would fight to his last breath. The assassin seemed to sense his weakness, pressing his advantage, his blade a blur of silver as he drove Nick back, step by inexorable step. Nick's blaster clicked empty, and he tossed it aside, snatching up a fishing gaff from the deck, the wicked hook gleaming in the sun. He parried a blow from the assassin's blade, the impact jarring his arm to the shoulder. But he didn't falter, spinning the gaff in a glittering arc, forcing the Quenmale to leap back, snarling in frustration. They circled each other, two predators locked in a dance of death. The sea and sky forgotten, the universe narrowed to this single, blood-soaked moment. And then out of the corner of his eye, Nick saw Cilia move. She had picked up his discarded blaster, her hands shaking, but her aim steady as she leveled it at the assassin's back. The Quenmale sensed the danger, starting to turn, but it was too late. Cilia pulled the trigger, and the bolt caught the assassin square between the shoulders, punching through his chest in a spray of blue blood. He staggered, his eyes going wide with shock, the blade falling from his nerveless fingers. Nick didn't hesitate. With a final mighty effort, he lunged forward, burying the hook of the gaff deep in the assassin's throat. The Quenmale gurgled, black blood bubbling from his lips, his hands scrabbling weakly at the metal embedded in his flesh. And then he toppled, his body hitting the deck with a heavy thud, the light fading from his cold, dead eyes. Nick stared down at the fallen assassin, his chest heaving, his blood mingling with that of his foe on the sun-warmed deck. Slowly, painfully, he turned to face Cilia, her luminous eyes wide with shock and fear. "Nick," she whispered, the blaster falling from her trembling hands. "Oh gods, Nick, you're hurt." He managed a weak smile, his hand pressing against the wound in his chest. "It's just a scratch, sweetheart. I've had worse." But even as he spoke, he could feel his knees buckling, his vision starting to gray at the edges. Cilia was at his side in an instant, catching him as he fell, cradling his head in her lap. "Stay with me, Nick," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Please, stay with me. I can't lose you. Not now. Not like this." Nick lifted a shaking hand to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I'm not going anywhere, love. I promised you forever, remember?" Cilia let out a choked sob, pressing her forehead to his. "Forever," she whispered, her voice fierce with love and determination. "You're mine, Nick Jackson, and I'm not letting you go." With the last of his strength, Nick pulled her down into a kiss, pouring all his love, all his devotion, into that final, desperate press of lips. And then the darkness claimed him, dragging him down into a sea of black. But even as he slipped into unconsciousness, he could feel Cilia's presence, her love anchoring him to the world. She was his light, his beacon in the dark, guiding him back to shore. And he knew, with a certainty that defied reason or logic, that he would find his way back to her. No matter the cost, no matter the odds, he would always find his way home. To her. To there forever. Nick drifted in a sea of darkness, tossed by fevered dreams and half-remembered horrors. He saw the faces of his fallen comrades, their eyes accusing in death. He heard the screams of the innocents he'd failed to save, the pleas of the dying and the damned, And always, always, he felt the searing pain in his chest, the hot gush of blood between his fingers. But through it all, through the nightmare landscape of his subconscious, there was one constant, one shining light that pierced the gloom. Cilia, her voice, her touch, the feel of her love enveloping him like a warm, soothing balm. She was there in the darkness with him, whispering words of comfort and encouragement, her hands gentle on his fevered brow. "Come back to me, Nick," she murmured, her voice thick with tears. "Please, my love, come back to me. I need you. I can't do this without you." And slowly, painfully, Nick found himself swimming up from the depths, fighting his way back to the light, to her. He clung to her voice like a lifeline, using it to drag himself out of the abyss, inch by excruciating inch. Until at last, with a gasp and a shudder, he broke the surface, his eyes flying open to the sight of Cilia's tear-streaked face hovering above him. "Nick," she breathed, her voice trembling with relief and joy. "Oh, thank the gods, Nick! I thought I'd lost you." Nick blinked, his vision slowly coming into focus. He was lying in their bed, in the small cabin they shared on the outskirts of the way station. Sunlight streamed through the porthole, dappling Cilia's blue skin with gold. "How long?" he croaked, his throat dry and raw. "3 days," Cilia replied, her hand stroking his hair, his cheek. "The longest 3 days of my life. The medics didn't think you'd make it, but I never lost hope. I knew you'd come back to me." Nick managed a weak smile, his hand finding hers, twining their fingers together. "I'll always come back to you, love, no matter what." Cilia let out a choked sob, pressing her lips to his knuckles. "I was so scared, Nick. When I saw you fall, when I saw all that blood." She shook her head, unable to continue. Nick squeezed her hand, ignoring the pain that lanced through his chest at the movement. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Cilia nodded, taking a deep, shuddering breath. I know, but Nick, we can't stay here. It's not safe. If Zaid's assassins found us once, they'll find us again." Nick frowned, his mind racing. She was right. As much as he loved their life here, as much as he wanted to stay in this little bubble of happiness they'd created, he knew it couldn't last. Not with the specter of Cilia's past hanging over them. "What do you suggest?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Cilia met his gaze, her eyes fierce with determination. "We have to go back to Kenya. We have to confront Zaid, to put an end to this once and for all." Nick's heart clenched at the thought of Cilia returning to the planet that had brought her so much pain, so much sorrow. But he knew she was right. They couldn't run forever. Sooner or later, they would have to face her demons head on. "Okay," he said at last, his voice rough with emotion. "Okay, we'll go to Kenya. We'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe, to make sure you never have to live in fear again." Cilia's eyes welled with tears, her hand cupping his cheek. "I love you, Nick Jackson. More than life, more than breath." Nick turned his head, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I love you too, Cilia. Always and forever." They held each other then, taking comfort in the solid warmth of their bodies, the steady beat of their hearts. They knew the road ahead would be long and hard, fraught with danger and uncertainty, but they also knew that together they could face anything, overcome anything. Their love was a force to be reckoned with, a bond that could not be broken by time or distance, by hatred or fear. It was a love that had been forged in the crucible of war and loss, tempered by the fires of passion and devotion. And as they lay there, wrapped in each other's arms, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it as one. One heart, one soul, one unbreakable unit. For they were Nick and Cilia, the trooper and the princess, the human and the Quen. Two lost souls who had found each other across the vast expanse of space and time, who had defied the odds and the gods to build a life, a love that would stand the test of eternity. And nothing, not Zaid, not the assassins, not the whole damn universe would ever tear them apart. The twin suns of Quenya beat down on the great plaza, bathing the assembled crowd in a wash of golden light. Nick stood at the foot of the dais, his dress uniform crisp and clean, his chest bedecked with medals and ribbons. At his side, resplendent in a gown of shimmering blue, stood Cilia, her head held high, her eyes shining with joy and triumph. It had been a long and difficult road, fraught with danger and heartache, but they had emerged victorious, their love and their bond stronger than ever. Together they had rallied the Queen people, exposing Zaid's tyranny and corruption, his cruelty and his lies. They had fought side by side, blaster and blade, heart and soul, until at last the usurper king had fallen, His reign of terror ended forever. And now, as the high priestess placed the crown on Celia's brow, as the crowd erupted in cheers and applause, Nick felt a swell of pride and love so fierce it stole his breath. She was radiant, his Celia, a true queen in every sense of the word, and he knew, with a certainty that defied logic or reason, that she would lead her people into a new era of peace and prosperity, of justice and compassion. As the ceremony ended and Celia turned to face him, her eyes luminous with love and gratitude, Nick felt a sense of homecoming, of rightness settle over him like a warm, familiar cloak. This was where he belonged, at her side, now and forever. This was the life, the love, the future he had always dreamed of, even if he hadn't known it until the moment she dropped into his net, into his heart. "I love you, Nick Jackson," Celia murmured, her hand finding his, their fingers twining together. "My heart, my soul, my everything." Nick smiled, his throat tight with emotion. "I love you too, Celia. My queen, my siren, my forever." And as he drew her into his arms, as their lips met in a kiss that held the promise of eternity, Nick knew that he was home, that he was whole, that he was exactly where he was meant to be. For he was hers and she was his. Two hearts, two souls, two halves of the same unbreakable whole. And nothing, not time, not distance, not the whole damn universe would ever change that.